All right, excellent. Well, everyone, it is the top of the hour. I am Audrey Eloquin. I am the AWS Alliance Manager for Apps Associates, and I would like to personally thank you for joining today's webinar. We as in the greater team, you can see Srinivas and Praveen, we just welcome you to today's session titled Finance Visualized, Driving Business Insight with Redshift and Oracle. And if you haven't been a part of the series thus far, this is a continuation of the Modern BI Journey series with Amazon Web Services that focuses on the Oracle customer, specifically the Oracle application customer, and the things that we can do to incrementally build upon your strategy from an analytics perspective as we start to incorporate more of a cloud-based platform as part of the solution. I'm fortunate to be joined today by Srinivas Pathareddy, our VP of Analytics, and Praveen Sharuvu, who is our Director of Analytics. And I do again appreciate the time that it takes to turn on the Zoom and start to tackle your afternoon with us. So that said, like last week, I'd like to walk through a few house rules. Our session is being recorded and your lines are on mute. All those questions are encouraged. They can be submitted through the chat feature throughout today's session, and we'll go ahead and answer those at the end, time permitting. So from an agenda standpoint, today's session will narrow our focus on financials. With that, Srinivas will walk us through specific financial close challenges, the limitations of standard Oracle reports and subledger reconciliation, and financial close analytics. Praveen will then showcase a demo using Amazon's Redshift with AWS QuickSight. And we'll again end today's webinar with Q&A and closing remarks. So with that in mind, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Srinivas to kick us off. Over to you, Srinivas.
Thanks, Audrey. This is Srinivas Pathareddy from Apps Associates. So I'm going to start with the agenda today and just introduce the agenda. As part of that, introduce Apps Associates, talk about financial close challenges that most organizations using Oracle ERP have faced, limitations that standard Oracle reports bring about, even though there are benefits, but what are the limitations that we have seen with our customers. Then we'll talk about the subledger reconciliation financial close analytics that we have built for our customers and see how that is different and how that benefits the close process. And then we'll move towards the demo, which before the demo, we'll just do a recap of what we presented last week. Talk about approach to data analytics, our approach, and then we'll kind of end it up with a demo as the second half of the session. Quick introduction to Apps Associates. Apps Associates was founded in 2002, headquartered in Acton, Massachusetts. They have locations in multiple locations in US, Europe, and India. 300 active customers and an over 900 employees, full-time employees supporting these customers. Areas of specialization, business application implementation for Oracle applications and Salesforce, integration between different applications, whether it's between Salesforce, Oracle, analytics, building enterprise warehouses, data lakes, and visualization for different customers. Cloud service application and managed services. This is just to ensure that there is seamless support for the customers on a month-to-month basis, both for applications and managed services. And we have a very strong partnership with AWS, Oracle, and Salesforce that help us in our areas of specialization. The Oracle background, the Oracle application background is important for this conversation, primarily because we started implementing Oracle application quite some time back. We've been implementing Oracle ERP applications, supply chain, HCM, EPM, and have a deep expertise in the Oracle application, starting from the on-premise world, on-premise EBS world, and more recently in the Oracle cloud applications. And keeping that in mind, keeping the Oracle background in mind, we have a good amount of experience with the business process, the data associated to it, and that gives us leverage and a benefit when we try to build enterprise warehouses, lakes for our customers, and drives efficiency because of the knowledge that we have to the business process and the data. So today we will focus our topic, which is going to be the financial close and subledger reconciliation, and how do we drive insight using Redshift for the information that is stored in Oracle applications. So we'll start with the problem statement here, and and as far as financial close is concerned. So period close cycles involve a lot of transaction processing, reconciliation, journal entry capture, and then finally, the financial statement preparation that is sent to the market to SEC, and these are pretty timely. We don't have a leverage with respect to. There's limited flexibility to when this has to be completed. So all of these have to be completed timely, or the cutoff has to be done on time, and it starts with the subledgers that have to be closed, followed by the general ledger. And in most cases, the close process starts a couple of days before the month ends, and it kind of continues a week towards into the coming month. Now, the close cycles, as I mentioned, we have to. I mean, there is very limited scope for delays as far as reconciling the subledgers, closing the subledgers, and then making sure that financial statements are prepared once the general ledger is closed. Now, we go with the assumption that ERP systems would help with this process, but typical ERP systems, and including Oracle applications, don't automate the full end-to-end close and consolidation process. And this is, I mean, there are fragmented process, manual process, which are inefficient, and that happen throughout the accounting period. Now, with the introduction of subledger accounting in release 12, what we have seen is the financial close process has been, the effort has been made to streamline the process because of the link that has been enabled between general ledger and the subledger. And that link has enabled to get into the subledger details for the journals that have been posted. Now, so even though that functionality has been enabled, the drill down capability that you would expect has been limited, and you still have to spend hours formatting static reports, and sometimes you have to repetitively download data into Excel and then merge data, different sheets, perform calculations that are very independent to your area line of business. So all of this takes time with respect to the close cycle. And then if you have to develop any new reports or any new process for the close, and that also going through the development cycle and getting into production is time taking. So essentially the reliance on static rigid reports and the lack of drill down kind of complicates the close process. So moving on, what are the limitations that we see with respect to the standard Oracle reports, right? Now, there are, I mean, if you look at it, there are quite a few reports. I mean, there are different level of reports, detailed reports that are available for each subledger, and they provide information, but I think as far as the subledger reconciliation that helps the close process, identifying specific issues in the reconciliation process is one of the key factors, and I think that is where the limitation comes from. And if you're not able to identify the specific issues that is causing your reconciliation to fail, and if you're spending a lot of time, I think that's where the inefficiency is built in. Now, there's limited flexibility for data analysis and drill downs based on summary or aggregation that is being displayed. And some of the reporting, there's some reports where you can run for as of date, but there are other reports which are only limited for the current date. So all of this brings limitations that kind of prevent the efficiency that needs to be present for the cycle. Now, if you look at some of the reports that are there, the AP trial balance, for example, it shows the open invoices and any unpaid invoices, partially paid invoices. I mean, the balance, by supplier and by account, that needs to manage with your AP, with your general ledger. And then you have the payables to general ledger reconciliation report. This seems promising to start, but then there's challenges on how you would use it, because I think the differences that this report provides between the payable transactions and your accounting balances they're grouped by different transaction types, whether it's like invoices, prepayments, payments, and then it groups into transactions which are sourced from non-payable sources that are going through the payables process. And then you also have transactions that are listed, which are not either not transferred or not posted to the general ledger. And then even though there are differences that have been that are calculated, that are shown between these different transaction types, it becomes difficult to really nail down what is the real reason for this issue. And the same is true for on the receivable side, where you have the receivables to the general ledger reconciliation report, you have the similar challenges. Now on the aging side, which is like most of the aging reports, like typically most of the aging reports that we have, they include intercompany transactions. And when you try to reconcile by taking the intercompany transactions out, then you have a reconciliation issue. So there are challenges of how you would try to reconcile between your aging report and to your general, and to, like, say, whether it is your receivable balance or your payable balance. And that's what I think we want to cover as part of this. And then bank account reconciliation is good in the sense you're able to match against using your transaction or your payment or your general line entry. But then I think the limitations with respect to not, you can only run it for the current date. And then if you have to match your distributions for the receipt against the general ledger, it becomes a challenge. On the inventory side, also the inventory value reports, whether it's in transit or receiving, or the WIP value report, they provide details, detailed breakdown on the value, whether it is material, resource, outside processing cost, or overhead. They will provide the breakdown, but then if there's a difference between the inventory value reports and your general ledger, then there's very little information that can help you match that identify the reasons for the differences that will help you match with the general ledger balances. So all of this together are kind of challenges. And similarly on the receivable side, if you have unaccounted transactions and then that are not accounted to, or they're not accounted to your receivable or tied to your receivable or posted to your receivable balance account, then those would be, you would be missing those as part of the reconciliation process. That would be similar for your unapplied and unaccounted accounts as well. So all of this presents a challenge. And then as we see, we have, you can see the summarization here with respect to what Oracle provides, the differences between the transaction type, differences and summarizations at the transaction type and posting statuses, which is the focus. And the differences that are identified mostly are around transactions, whether the transactions that are not accounted or subledger accounts that fall outside the range, or they don't, the details don't agree with the summary, or the source of the journal, or the source of the transactions came outside the subledger itself, or they're not posted, right? So some of these details are helpful, but are limited in how they help in the reconciliation process. Now, so let's go to a typical solution that we've worked through with our customers, and how it has helped us in how it has helped us build something for the customers. Now, if you look at and reporting in an analytical solution for the financial close and the subledger reconciliation, I mean, we have what we need is an automated way of kind of automate all the unproductive and redundant steps that you would follow in your subledger reconciliation process. And so any time that you're downloading multiple extracts from your database or from applications into spreadsheets, merging, performing calculations, all of those can be automated. And then the drill down into transaction details, drill down into exceptions that are causing issues would kind of help in eliminating the need to run these multiple reports and consolidating or merging these different reports. Now, on top of it, the framework that we try to follow is we follow a methodology where we use exceptions-based reporting, which helps in faster resolution. So you're trying to reconcile your payables to your general ledger, and if there's if your aging balance, if your open aging doesn't match with your payables account balance, then there are differences. And how do you kind of get to the differences? What are the transactions that are causing the difference? So identifying those exceptions helps with a faster resolution, so that users can go and correct those transactions and then rerun their process. And then the focus on this framework is reconciliation at the account level. So essentially, if all your accounts are tied between your subledger and a general ledger, and that is the cleanest way that we can kind of enable the reconciliation process. That is the highest level that you can go towards in making sure that all your transactions at the transaction level are accounted for. And then the year-over-year analysis, period-over-period analysis helps in kind of getting trends in this process, as far as trends in what has been your open balances period over period or year over year. And even for financial statements typically which are generated, I think most of them present the year over year analysis, and those are useful for submission of financial statements to the market and SEC. Now, in order to support all of this, what we need is a detailed account analysis with all the subledger information. So we have, there is existing subledger information, but that's limited with respect to the criteria that you can run it for. In some cases, the level of, may not have all the subledger details that you need. So the account analysis, getting all the subledger information for the account range that you're looking for, a comprehensive list is one of the key things that is needed in order to make sure that your process is run efficiently. And then the final thing is, I mean, we see, I mean, there are upstream systems, and then ultimately you have business processes that run through and transfer data to your general ledger. Reconciliation at each step in the data flow process is important to identify where we are seeing the differences and how do you catch them early. And one of the final point is, I mean, you want to do this more periodically than kind of catching all of this at the month end where you're kind of inundated with a lot of issues with respect to the close. So what we have is we have a financial close analytics that we work with our customer, and what we have done is the key things when we talk about like payables and receivables, the focus or the focus for finance always has been am I able to match my aging balance with my aging open balance with my trial balance reports, right? Am I able to do that? And if I'm not able to do it, what are the differences? We talked about differences with respect to the aging that shows, that includes intercompany, and how do you kind of account for those, and how do you use that in order to identify them correctly, and then make sure that it matches with your trial balance, especially, and it becomes especially challenging when there are prepayments involved on both sides in order to match them. Now, on the payables, or either both for both payables and receivables, having that individual transactions included month by month, whether it is by supplier or customer, is another important set of details that is needed in order to enable help in the reconciliation process. Then multi-period transactions and amortization and any amortizations that is happening period over period, identifying how much is expensed and then remaining amortized amount. All of this is useful in order to make sure that the reconciliations tie out. Now, as far as one of the key important things for any organization is making sure that sales, I mean, the total sales that has been booked matches with the revenue that is recognized. We have seen a lot of places where the sales doesn't match with the revenue that is recognized, and there are multiple reasons that it's possible, whether there's some as part of the business flow or the workflow that enables that moves the sales from the booking all the way to the shipping process and the revenue recognition process, and then finally the transfer to the general ledger. I mean, there's something that could possibly go wrong, and how do you kind of catch this and make sure that your sales that have been booked ultimately ties to your revenue that is recognized. Now that's an important metric that we use to measure ourselves in order to make sure that this information that is captured and the accuracy of information and the business process that is used to kind of to run the different process within the application are all working accurately. And then on the inventory side, we've seen standard reports like the inventory value reports, but as I mentioned earlier, if there are differences, it becomes very difficult to understand what is the difference between my inventory value that I run the subledger and how do I match it with the trial balance. So what we've done is identifying identifying at the account level and that item level areas of differences. What is it that what is it that is falling off with respect to your reconciliation process? It could be like the accounts that are being used, or there could be some items that are uncosted versus costed. And then the sub inventory level settings that could make a difference. So a lot of different factors that go in this process. And then auditors, so there are auditors in certain organizations that look for the inventory roll forward, which kind of helps in identifying what my ending balance is going to be based on the stocks, the purchases, the sales orders, sales that have been generated, and then compare that with my general ledger balance, identify what the differences are, and then have a process to figure out what's making up the difference. And then finally, I mean, as part of the accrual process, identifying uninvoiced receipts is really important. I want to make sure that this is, I think, everything that has been received as part of your receiving process, and if there's an invoice that has not been generated, how do you identify that? And that's been a common problem that we have seen at many organizations. And then the last part that I would like to discuss is the cash receipt reconciliation itself. Receipts that are created in some cases, you don't have details that you're getting from your bank, or details with respect to the transactions, and in those cases, you're not able to tie all your transactions to your general ledger, and how can you kind of make sure that all your receipts that are generated are distributed and are reconciled with your general ledger. So all of these are details that we have captured as part of the solution that helps in making sure that the differences between the subledger and the general ledger have been accounted, and your close process is able to run smoothly. Now, what we do is I think using this, what we discussed between talking about the limitations and also based on what we have done at other customers, we want to talk about our approach of how we have built this financial data analytics, and what has been our approach of extracting information from customers, from customer applications into AWS framework, right? Using a combination of S3, Redshift, and then QuickSight. And how do we get this data out? And what is the kind of approach? So this is something that we talked last week. I just wanted to use this as a brief recap, primarily because this is going to set the stage for what we're going to see in the demo, because the demo is going to follow along the same lines. And if you can see, we are taking the data from the different source applications. We have used a combination of scripts to kind of pull this information into a raw bucket where this is all the information in detailed format that is sourced out of the business applications. And that information is curated at two levels, level 1, 2, and level 3, primarily to make sure that information from different sources also transformed and curated at the same level can be used for reporting across different business applications. And there are different ways to do it. Some of the consolidation and curation can happen at the Redshift layer, and some of it can happen at the S3 layer, so that other applications like whether it's SageMaker, Athena, or EMR can leverage the information that has been captured, and then finally the transfer information can be stored in Redshift. And then what are we going to do? The approach that we'll follow here is we're just taking a simple example here. I think this diagram shows one data set, which is talking about journals. But in the demo that we will see, we have taken data sets like this across different business applications, and we have consolidated them in order to prepare the data set. So in our interest of time, we've consolidated all this information by taking similar data sets like what we're showing here, moving it into S3, and then followed by transforming them into Redshift, so that ultimately the different data sets can be grouped, consolidated, and aggregated, so that the consolidated transform information can be easily used in QuickSight for reporting against Redshift. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Praveen. So Praveen is going to help us walk through the demo, and he's going to show us the process that I just outlined with a certain example, and show us a dashboard that talks about the reconciliation that we just saw. It won't be everything, but it will show an example of how we envision a dashboard to look like, and what are the different metrics and the kind of details that we would that we have done for other customers. Praveen,
Thank you, Josh.
yeah.
Let me share my screen. So, hello everyone. So as the screen was mentioned, so what are we going to try do in this particular demo is I would want to walk you through the sample data set. Again, understanding that this is your real kind of data set, right? So I've already extracted pre-sampled data set over here, which is by year, month, different ledgers that are there, any currencies, type of transaction, whether it's payable, receivables, inventory, and for a business unit or an odd combination, and just GL balances and the summarization. So what you're seeing over here is purely an aggregated of your data set to give you a flavor of what we are actually trying. So based on this data, what I'm going to do is the first thing is load this data into an S3 bucket so that I can start consuming from my Redshift application. So what I'm doing is I'm just connecting to, you can see over here, I'm just connecting to my Redshift application already here. I'm using SQL Developer as a tool over here. You can use any tool of choice, or you can use the Redshift itself directly has a editor. We can use it, but in this case, I'm just using SQL Developer over here just for my usage. And I've already created a structure of a table. So let me just query this table. It's called a subledger fact, and you can see that similar granularity or the aggregation that is mentioned in the table is available over here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to first load this data. So it's a before loading, I have to place this file into an S3 bucket. So I'm using a tool over here where I'm just clicking on the files and saying upload, and it just points to the location where my file exists. So I can just have this available, and I'm just selecting this, and you can see that it's loaded into into the S3 schema. And what I'll do is before actually loading, I'll just navigate to the S3 just to confirm whether the bucket is available or not, right? So I've already pre-logged into my AWS management console. So from there, I'm just navigating to my S3, and here I have a bucket called a Redshift. So I'm just navigating to that, and within that, I have a folder called CSV files, and let me just sort it out. And you can see that it's been loaded just a couple of seconds ago, right? So this is the file that is there. So I have confirmed that the file has been loaded. Now I'm actually navigating back to my my SQL developer. And here I have a simple script where I'm actually copying this, whatever the data that is there in this CSV file into my subledger using a role and a region. And then I'm specifying it as a CSV. So you can have data loaded into different formats, but in this case, I'm just loading a simple CSV file. So this just completed. I just want to query and see whether the data is available. And you can see that the data is available a whole year for my analysis. One thing I want to do is I already have a sample data set over here which says subledger data, but this was not the file which I loaded. So I want to just change it a little bit and make sure that I'm loading the right file. So for that, let me just take the file name. So it says as subledger data 070920. I'm just changing this file over here, just in the script, just slightly modifying. I want to make sure that I truncate this table, load it again, and then, so now you can see that this is the data which I'm looking for. So now what I'll do is let me just navigate back to my AWS management console. So here, so what I've basically done is I already have a Redshift cluster over here, which is pre-configured, and all I've done is I've already connected to my Redshift cluster using the SQL developer. And because I have all the details configured, I've just taken my aggregated data, whatever, in this case, it's a subledger aggregated data. So I already have that, and then I just loaded that into my Redshift schema. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly navigate to my quick site. So you can actually do it here. You can say quick site, and you can click on this, and it will take you to the quick site homepage. one thing you need to know is before logging to the QuickSight, you need to first configure. And because I've already pre-configured, I have done it. It's automatically taking me to the home page of the QuickSight. But in case it's your first time, it'll make sure that you need to make sure that you actually set up those simple parameters first, and then basically you have to set the region and where it has to be configured, what account and things of that, and then it will allow you to log in. So here, what I'm going to do is, since I've loaded the data into Redshift, I'm going to create a simple reports out of it and then going to publish it and then start sharing, right? So that's the thought process I have. So for that, first I'm going to click on new analysis. And here, I want to create a new data set for my subledger data. So I'm just going to click on the new data set. And these are all different data sources which you can connect from QuickSight. So you can, if you have a CSV file directly, you can do it. So instead of loading into Redshift, you can even do that. But in this case, I want to, I'm going through the Redshift so that we give that kind of analysis, and later if you want to manipulate or do any kind of changes, you can certainly do that. But it can also connect to Salesforce, RDS, MySQL Server, Snowflake, other services as well. So I'm not going to touch all of that, but what I'm going to do is I already have my Redshift database configured. So I'm just going to select that and click on this create dataset. So what it does is now it's trying to connect to the Redshift database that is available, and it'll show all my schemas. So in this case, I know that the schema that I've loaded, because I haven't specified any schema, it automatically loads into public schema. So I know that my table is available here. So let me just scroll to my subledger fact. So this is the subledger F, which I've created where my data exists. So I'm just going to select that. First, view the data. Whatever I viewed in the SQL developer, do I see the same thing or not? So I want to preview that data. And so it is just loading, and you can see that it looks similar to what I'm looking for. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just name this saying that subledger dataset. So there are multiple options over here. You can see that there is a spice option and the direct query option. I'm going to select a spice option. So spice option is basically, it's kind of in memory. It extracts the data and loads it. So I'm just going to select that, and then immediately what I'm going to do is I click on save and visualize. So what it's doing is it's first creating the data set and immediately taking me to my analysis screen where I can start reporting the data. So you can see that the import is complete, the data is available in Spice, so I can start building my reports. So so the idea over here is just build some subledger reports, certainly payables versus trial balance, and then receivables versus trial balance, and then inventory versus the trial balance. So I want to just build that and just build some key KPIs kind of so that it just showcases what data I'm looking at for the current month, and then do it. So one of the things which I want to also highlight is in my sample data set, I just have data for 2019 and the latest month is 12. So I'll be building an analysis considering 2019, October, November, December as my data. Okay. So here, I already have a visualization. So what I'm going to do is simple tabular view. So I'm just selecting table over here. There are different options, autograph, KPIs, line graph, bar graphs, pivot, everything. But I'm just going to, in this case, trying to keep it simple because it's more of a reconciliation report. So when you're looking at a reconciliation, you want to look at the numbers and the variance and percentages, those kind of things, rather than graphical, right? So that's where I'm just trying to build in that way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select BU. Then I'm going to select, you can just do a control and select. So I'm going to select BU, and I'm going to select org. Okay. And as metrics, I'm going to select GL balances, subledger amount, variance. So I just have multiple components over here. So let me just expand this to showcase. So you can see that I have this data. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just try to apply couple of filters. So what I'm going to do is I have a type which distinguish whether it's a payables data versus receivables or inventory. So I'm just going to click on this, add, so I'm going to click on this filter, this one, and say add filter to the field. And here, before applying, let me change this title of this particular view to maybe payables subledger. And so because I know it is payable subledger, I'm going to apply this filter. So click on that. It should take like a couple of seconds for the data to come in. And once the data is coming, then what I'll do is I'll apply. So I have three different data sets available. So I'm just going to select on the payables, click apply. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is I'm also going to restrict data by year. So I want to just apply a filter on maybe year or month. So maybe because I know I just have 2019 data, I'm going to apply a filter on month, click month. Then here I'm going to select October, November, December. So let me just pull that. So I got the data set and I'm just selecting 10, 11, 12. I'm clicking apply. So before moving on creating other data sets, I want to first do some simple calculation and then maybe move over. Or maybe I'll just keep it like this and maybe I'll try to make similar changes later. But what I'm going to do is I don't want org in the payable side. So let me just drop this. I don't want this org. So I'm just removing it. And instead I'll just try to display the month over year. Okay, so I have the data available now. This is just for payable. So let me just minimize this slightly. Okay, so now the payables one. So I want to replicate this for my inventory as well, right? So before that, let me inventory and receivables. Before that, let me just do some formatting of these column names. So I'm just there's an option over here called format visual. So for this specific visual, so I'm selecting that. And here, let me just change this column name. So I'm just saying as business unit, just say this as month. And here for the GL balance, I'll say trial balance. And because this I know it is payables, I'm going to say payables aging. And I'll just name it as variance. So just check it out. Yeah, it looks good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate this for receivables and inventory. So you don't need to go through all this thing again. So what I'm going to do is there's an option to actually duplicate visual. So I'm going to select this and say duplicate visual. And before making any changes, I want to change this heading or title to receivable so that I'm not actually changing on both ends, right? So I just change it to receivables. And I know in the filters, the type earlier was payable, so I'm going to change this to receivables. I have the receivables stuff, and I also want to make sure I'm just changing the column name so that instead of the payable staging, I'm saying receivable staging. Okay, so I have created two different data sets. So let me just move this towards here, or maybe just shrink it a little bit so that I can see side by side. I'm just yeah. So I'm just making some adjustments over here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate this, duplicate visual, and here I'm going to name this as inventory. So for inventory, I think before what I want to do is I don't want to look at by business unit, but instead I want to look at by org. So I'm going to click on this fields wells option at the top, and I'm going to drag this org and put in place of BU. So I have the data. So the only thing is now I'm going to change the filters, change the type to inventory. So it's by org. I'm going to, I want to change the heading. So let me just change it to the column name or to organization. Or I would say maybe inventory org. So in this way, we just created a simple visualizations over here. So what I'm going to do is before jumping in, let me just move this slightly over here and minimize. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some key KPIs. So for that, let me just click on add visual over here. And it's over here. So at the bottom, you see visual types. I'm going to select that. I'm going to select KPIs. So before making any changes, let me just move this to the top so that I know my KPIs are displayed at the top. So let me just do that. Yep. So here, what I'm doing is, again, the 3 KPIs for the payables, receivables, and inventory, I'm going to create it, but I'm going to restrict it to the latest month, which is 12, right? So I'm going to restrict that and see how my KPI looks at. So here, I'm going to look at my variance, basically. So this is my variance, but because I want to restrict for a specific type, so I want to apply a filter and say that this is for payables. So this is my overall variance for the year. So if you want to keep it as YTD, you can keep it. But in this case, I don't want to keep that YTD, so I want to restrict it for a specific month, which is the latest month. So I'll just say month equal to 12. So this is my variance over here. And let me just minimize this slightly. And I would say here, payables PTD variance. So I'm just naming it as that. And I'm going to duplicate this visual over here. Obviously, it'll create at the bottom. I'm just dragging it to the top. Okay, and before making any changes, again, change it to receivables PTD variance. I'll apply the same thing. Filter, change my type to payables. Sorry, to receivables. So this is my receivable variance PTD. And what I'm going to do is, I think before that, let me also format this slightly. The font maybe to medium. Let me just change it because it looks a little bit bigger. So I'm just changing this same thing over here. I'll say medium. Change this and move it over here. And then what I will do is I'm going to duplicate visual. And this would be my inventory one. Change this to inventory PTD variance. Go to filters and change it to inventory. So I've just created a simple KPIs visualizations, right? So let me just create a title for this. So I'm just going to click on this and add title and say this as subledger reconciliation. So the idea is that, okay, if you already have an aggregated available, in most cases, you would have something like that, and you're just playing around, right? So that's what we have done over here. So let me just do some kind of a little bit formatting over here so that I can adjust my screen a little bit. So I think we just do that, and let me just do it over here as well, and here as well. Okay. So this looks good. I think my variance is gone over here. Yeah, this looks good. And then lastly, I think once you have done, you can just share this. I can just publish this dashboard, and I can just give subledger reconciliation. Maybe it's for 2019. Just go there. You can just click on publish, and then you can share that to users who are already have access. You can start sharing, but then when you log in, I think this is a kind of view that usually you get it. You can also do some kind of calculations. There are tons of stuff that you can do. So let me just before wrapping, just do a slight change, add some calculations so that you just get a flavor of that as well. So I'm just going back to my subledger analysis. And here, I'm going to create a field, and in one of the report, instead of displaying these months, I'm going to display a month name because in my data set, I don't have that. So I'm just creating a maybe a calculator field over here. And I'm going to give this as month name. And there are a set of functions that are available, predefined functions, which you can use it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use if else stuff. So I'm saying if else month equal to 10, then display it as October. If month equal to 11, then display as November. If month equal to 12, then December, else other. I'm just doing something like that. Just give a name, and you can see that here you'll see that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this payable subledger, and I'm going to replace this month with my month name. So you can you have to click here and replace this over here. And once I made that change, I can just share again, republish. So I can just say replace an existing dashboard. So I'm just publishing it over here. And again, if you want to share to other users, you can do it. But so in this way, you have just created a sample calculation. Just did the functions, whatever you wanted, and just published. So once this is published, again, this is a routine where on a monthly basis, users can log in, just look at the data, and you can automate all of that aspect. I think they should give you an idea about overview of the flow, what we started. So we took a sample subledger data, just loaded that into an S3 bucket and utilized and loaded finally into a Redshift using a copy command. Once that is available, utilize QuickSight to do a sample analysis and showcase a dashboard. Srinivas, I think over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. Thanks for putting this together. So as you could see, what we have done is based on all the use cases, the different examples that I've shown, I've talked about. I mean, we've taken a simple data set in order to pictorially depict what we can really do with the information, collect the subledger information, and then reconcile with the general ledger. So that's something that most organizations typically look for as part of the close process. And this is just to kind of demonstrate what you can do, and especially when you're dealing with millions of records, Redshift is going to enable you in order to make sure that the performance that you get in order to process all the data is going to be much faster and deliver these results on not only on a monthly basis, but something that you can run daily for your users, that they can look at the reconciliation differences on a daily basis, and then so that at the month end, your differences are much more manageable and you're not really struggling to figure out everything that's gone through the month. So at this point, I would like to kind of get Audrey back. Hi, Audrey. So we just want to about next steps and then go from there.
Okay, excellent. Yep. So in terms, by the way, thank you, Srinivas and Praveen. So from a next step standpoint, I mean, the intention behind the series is to walk through specific use cases pertinent to Amazon's offering, and to find ways to piecemeal that offering. So if anything, reach out to us if you have specific questions. But in the meantime, we will continue to topically move forward with the progression of the series. So looking in that light, looking forward, next week's session is titled Supply Chain Visualized, where we'll walk through a similar type process, but focalizing more on supply chain in terms of the data extraction. So with that in mind, Srinivas, I'm actually going to look to a couple questions that came in during the session. And the first will be directed to you, and the second will be directed over to Praveen. So First things first, how does the solution using AWS Redshift improve the efficiency in the close process?
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think with respect to the close process, sometimes you're talking about data which, if you look at transactions, whether it is sales orders and all the way through shipping and inventory processing, I mean, it could involve millions in records, and there are multiple jobs that run at the month end, and trying to process all of these jobs at the same time is challenging. And I think that's where we have identified and found that Redshift is really helpful with respect to making the performance much better, making sure that the users are able to get their process, able to run their process on time and get the results that they need. And the other thing is, I think the difference, I mean, the way we capture the details from the different source systems, we capture all the source level details in the different stages that I walked through. And taking all that source information, trying to reconcile the subledgers, because it involves a lot of data, and in taking all the data both from the subledgers, general ledger, and doing that comparison by account for each of the subledgers is tedious, and having to go through that process at the close time is fairly involved. So as part of this, doing that reconciliation, identifying those differences and exceptions, using the process and the methodology that we have adopted in using Redshift, I think makes it much faster and enables us to get to the differences in a very cost-effective way.
Okay. Well said. Thank you. All right, and then let's see. And then from a second question standpoint, Praveen, over to you. Where do you source the information from, and what is the process used for reconciliation?
Sure. Thanks, Audrey. So you can there are multiple sources you can source from. There are wide varieties. You can definitely source from any of the ERP applications, Salesforce, Snowflake data warehouse, or S3, or anything like that, third-party application. So I think we have seen that as we were diving through the quick start, and similar activities is also available from Redshift as well. So from a holistic approach, you can look at source as long as the data is readable. It's any database or a flat file, or any semi-structured data. You can load the data into an S3 kind of an availability from a data lake standpoint, and then utilize from a Redshift or any reporting platform, right? So that is available. The second point to that is what is the process that we use for reconciliation? So most of our associates are EBS centric. I think we have well knowledge on the business application side. So we bring in that knowledge for any of the reconciliation. So we see these aspects on a month-end close, and we have helped a lot of customers validating and going through that process. So what we have done is we have brought in that knowledge, the standard knowledge, and try to build a validation scripts as part of our methodology. So based on as we go through the build cycle and development, we have embedded those unit testing, or basically validating with the source standard reports. So as Srinivas highlighted some of the standard reports, we have built basic queries behind the scenes on that. And as we load the data into a data warehouse or a data lake, we tend to use those standard queries, which actually gives us the end result, which basically entitles us for easier validation. So that's the process we have done throughout our implementations.
Okay, excellent. And then just looking at the clock, I have one more question, and then we'll go ahead and close out and give you your afternoon back. So initially a statement, it says the dashboard built seems to be like something you can build in OTBI using common dimensions with multiple subject areas. I guess, is that true? And then if so, or irregardless, what's the primary driver to go through extra effort to put data in AWS?
Yeah, so I can take that, Audrey. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think it's similar to OTBI or OBI. You can build a similar kind of reporting in any tool set. I think most of the tools these days are similar. I think the advantage that you get with AWS, as Srinivas mentioned, is if you're working with millions of records and transactions, you want to have one of the key driver is the performance, and you look at that aspect and try to try to make sure that your end users are actually getting the flexibility and the performance out of it. So the difference is making sure like how you're actually processing incrementally your millions of records into the system, and at the end the performance bottlenecks that you were getting earlier, trying to create it from the system, right? So that's the main thing. But on the OTBI, I think it certainly has limitations. You can't do any trend reports or any cross-subject area kind of reporting. So you have certainly, I think every tool has its own advantages. The OTBI is more from a transactional side, whereas here we are trying to do more from a data warehousing and working with different data sets, not only just Oracle or EBS, but any source so that you can do the analysis.
And just
All
on that,
right.
just adding at that point with OTBI, yeah, as Praveen mentioned, there's some limitations. I think with especially when you try to reconcile your subledger data with general ledger, I think there is, I mean, it's difficult to sometimes do it with OTBI, and some of those processing are pretty intensive. So I think when you try to accomplish that, you would hit certain limitations, and I think those are the ones that we tend to kind of use a warehouse that can process millions of records seamlessly.
Okay. All right. Thank you too. And thank you for all the good questions today. So I just wanted to take the time to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today. And then also just to again, paint the picture for next week. We will have 3 more sessions for the remainder of the series, 2 of which will be a bit more topical, like I mentioned, and the last will be more of a hands-on lab so that you can actually, put your, well, I was going to say make it a bit more tactile and the ability to be hands-on in learning some of this alongside our team, and then having that oversight and that guidance along the way. So the next few Thursdays, you'll receive notifications that there will be upcoming sessions. But in the meantime, do have a good afternoon, and we look forward to having you back next week. Thanks all.